All right, so I'm Tashara Carnahan.
I'm Cami Orton.
I'm Lauren Buchan.
I'm Jessica Vasquez. And I'm Jessica Vasquez.
Okay, so the first question, having completed the book, how has your understanding and perception increased on the process of international policy and law?
I thought it was very eye-opening about how the UN plays a role. Because I think before I read the book, I didn't really know that much. Like, oh yeah, I knew what the UN was. But I thought it had more, okay, this is me confusing. On the one hand, I thought it had more power than it did. And by that, I mean officially, like to make laws and policy and stuff. And so by reading the book, I realized that, like, oh, that's not the case. But I realized how much power they do have through influence, if that makes sense. Kind of what it was talking about in the book.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that I'm very similar to you because I knew what the UN was, kind of. I had heard of it. I didn't really know, I should say. I have heard of it. And so my understanding of it was that, yeah, delegates from all different countries come and they agree on specific things and they make policies and stuff. But I didn't understand that if the policies weren't signed on, that we could still pull them for our judicial system.
As official.
I didn't understand that we could still use international documents even if we hadn't signed them, which kind of scared me a lot, because if we as a country don't agree with what other countries are signing on for and then we're pulling them anyway, I mean, the people don't have a say in that, which is kind of scary.
Yeah, I thought I only knew the UN, but I didn't know anything that they did. And it just looks like it takes so much effort to get something completed, but then a lot of times it won't be completed because and then they have to start over and then do it all over again, and then I don't know. It's so much work.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I felt like after reading the book, I kind of more aware how the general public is becoming informed and what came to be informed about how there's really very little representation of the general public in the UN. So.
Okay. What role did you see the Lord playing in Professor Wilkins' efforts to advocate for the families of the world, and what lessons did you learn for your own efforts?
Well, he brought the proclamation with him, so he kind of based some of that stuff on that.
I also noticed how he was able to be influenced, through the Spirit. I guess just how he felt calm when he needed to be calm, and he knew that he was going to be the one to speak. He didn't really feel worried about that. And I especially thought it was really sweet how he talked about the influence of his wife. And I think probably, I don't know, maybe not directly, but I would say that God was an influence in that and helping him, I guess, be inspired to, when he needed to call his wife, and helped her to know what to say to help him. And I don't know. That's kind of what I thought about.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead.
Okay. I also saw how the Lord put a lot of different people in his path to both inform him and to also be a support for him. Well, I can't really think of one specific person, but yeah, by placing a lot of people in his path throughout this entire journey, it gave him the tools that he needed, so that way he could be a strong advocate and be more confident in himself to be able to deliver that speech. And
that's true. I didn't think about that. Like how he talked about even at the end about the man who asked, "Where have you been?" That
Right.
that was probably really helpful to know that he wasn't standing alone and that other people agreed and were supporting him.
Yeah, I thought that it was important that the women's caucus came in to the room and totally shoved the Saudi Arabia woman out of speaking. And they asked for his talk as well. And instead of him being booted like the Saudi Arabia woman was, the Lord protected him to be able to still at least be in the round. But then they tried to kick him out again by adding more people to the poll. But the Lord blessed him with that one man who stood up in the crowd of all of those people saying, we came here to listen to a lot of different viewpoints and we haven't. So I think the Lord blessed that man to have the strength to say that in order to let Professor Wilkins actually speak. So that's another person who was able to influence him speaking. Because yes, the Lord always found a way for him to speak, but the way it was going, the women's caucus was trying to fill up all the time, and finally the man stood up saying, we want to hear another opinion, because we've heard all of your guys' opinions, and we're sick of it, kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
And even if he was limited to 4 minutes, the Lord had helped him prepare exactly the material that he needed. He didn't need 10 minutes, he only needed the 4, because he had prepared 4, because he was distracted and everything, but by the time he went in and was able to create the material, pulling from the proclamation and stuff, it only ended up being 4 minutes that he needed. So that was a blessing in and of itself as well. And I also think, like what you were saying, just pulling people, that one woman that he sat next to who would just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk all of that time, she gave him a lot of information on why the Women's Caucus was the way they were and how influential they became, and so he was able to see the workings behind it. Because if he hadn't known that, I don't think he would have understood why the Women's Caucus was in the room with him, watching over him like a hawk when he was writing the things, and just being more aware of how much
and what he's up
he
against.
had. Yeah, just being more aware of who he was up against.
Yeah, and then to go on to how does that affect us, I just was really touched when, at the end, he repeated, the question, where have you been? And I think, I just kind of applied that to myself. Well, what have I been doing? This is what I care about. What have I been doing about it? And what should I be doing about it?
Yeah, he said it like 3 times, I think, at least. So obviously it was important enough to write it down 3 different times.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other person who's writing it said anytime he talks about this experience, he'll ask that question.
Yeah. And I just got from it that as long as we're doing what the Lord has asked us to do and standing up for what we believe, He is going to help us, and He's going to support us, and He's going to make it happen. It might not be in the way we had planned or we had hoped, but He will still make it happen. So I thought that was interesting. And that kind of goes into the next question. We kind of briefed on it about a little the people in his path, but it asks, even though the book was largely about Richard Wilkins' experience, what important supporting roles did you see others playing in this account? Why is it important to recognize this?
I think that he mentioned even that, I'm trying to remember, I didn't read it all through at once, but I think he mentioned something about how he received a lot of the credit, that he'd, made this great change or had this big influence, but that he said it wasn't just him, it wasn't just United Families International, it was, the Catholics and the Muslims and, all these different groups who hadn't given up. And I think that just goes to show that it's important for many people to do little things rather than one person to do a great big thing. Because I think if all those people hadn't, if they'd given up before in other conferences and things like that, that maybe he wouldn't have even had the opportunity to do what he did.
Yeah.
I listed, of course, his wife, because every time he needed encouragement, he would go to her, and then the Susan Roylance or whoever, the one who proposed for him to go. And then I don't know if that was her or the Sue Barton lady that encouraged him to speak the second time. I can't remember if that was either one of them. And then the elder missionaries, weren't they the parents of a friend he knew in high school?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was thinking that he got support from them, and they actually helped him get to the place he was trying to get to at the end, which he had like a revelation pretty much of how to help people or help families, I think, in the end.
Yeah, I said that the big support was his wife, and I said that even though she wasn't there in Istanbul like everybody else in the United Families International group, she was always there when he needed her help. Like he would call, and instead of her saying that, "Oh, I miss you, give up, come home, we all need you here," she encouraged him to continue to work hard and to give his all, and just supporting him in that he was doing the right thing. And then, the other group members of the UFI group, I think, was another big support, just so that he wasn't alone there fighting for what he believed. He had a support group. Even though they weren't the ones speaking as well, they were still behind him saying, yes, we support exactly what he's saying and everything, instead of being surrounded by a bunch of people who are booing and hissing at you. You can go back to your group who, encourages you, saying, good job, we're fighting for what's right.
Mhm.
I think that overall, after reading all about how all these different people were helping him, it's important to recognize how also this reminds us that the Lord never leaves us to tackle something on our own, and that He's always going to send others our way to help us, and all those different rules are going to help us accomplish the Lord's work.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so ponder your readings from A Sacred Duty. What are some consequences and risks of minimizing or eliminating family and religion from public policy?
In the book, they talked about how there was some kind of fight or war, not war, but there was some kind of violent act. So I think that's one consequence, more violence. And it's also in the proclamation how once there's a disintegration of the family and a misinterpretation of what a family is, there's going to be war and violence will increase. So that's one consequence.
I think another problem with that is that I think a lot of people don't realize this, but that almost excludes people. And what I mean by that is that for me, my core beliefs about everything are influenced by my belief on family and religion. And so when you try to take that out, for me, it just doesn't work, because the reason that I believe what I do when it comes to different policies is because of how I feel about my faith. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just said a consequence for taking it out of public policy is that they won't be protected. And so our nations are built off of families, and that's how nations are formed. And like the book said, that's how our new generations are created, through families. So if the family isn't protected, any kind of family can be formed and considered protected under a policy, especially with the vague terms that they were talking about. And if religion is eliminated from public policy, then it's taking our right away from freedom of religion, which is a guaranteed right under the Constitution. So if that's gone, then what else can they take away from us? If they take away that freedom of religion, then they're going to be forcing churches to comply with standards that the nation sets in in regards to what they deem as a family. So same-sex marriages can be performed in certain churches even if they don't believe that, and just a whole bunch of things happen if family and religion aren't protected in public policy. So if they're eliminated from it, they're automatically not protected. So that's kind of a big deal.
There's also, when the women caucus overpowered everything, and I don't know, they kept going okay, children, they made it seem like they were slaves to their own children, and that they're spinning family into something negative, and
I don't understand that argument, because if you really thought that about children, why have them? You practice abstinence. That's the only surefire way that you will not have children. And people hate that answer because they're like, because we have sexual rights too. Well, okay, along with that come responsibilities that you need to be aware of. And if you don't like that, you can't practice them. Sorry. I mean, I just don't understand why that's even an argument.
It seems so they spin it so bad. They're either like, I don't want to have a kid, so I'm going to abort, or they're going to be like, okay, well, I have the kid now, what am I supposed to do? And they don't care. If you're going to do that, you should at least adopt them or give them to someone that's actually going to care.
I know.
My husband's best friend, his wife's sister gave up her newborn daughter because she knew she couldn't take care of her. So if they just thought, I don't know. I don't know why people have kids when they don't want them.
I don't either. I really don't. It will never make sense to me. It really won't. I don't. It takes a lot of love and care for your own child to give them up for adoption. And so those who do that because they realize that they cannot give that child a good life, those are the people to be commended, because the people who keep the kids who should have given them up for adoption are the ones that are making those poor children's lives miserable. But alright, so based on a sacred duty, what do you think we can do about it? Does the author implicitly or explicitly make realistic suggestions for ordinary citizens as well as those in a position of power and influence? Provide examples.
Well, he talked about that website they created, the NGO Family Violence.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, that's a pretty basic one that you could actually do and look up.
Yeah, something else was a quote that he said that can apply to both citizens and people with higher power. It was actually a really good quote. It says that first great choice is between growth and comfort, because the choice for growth means that we must make subsequent choices that make us uncomfortable. And so, both citizens and people with power can both apply this by remembering that they can make the greatest change if they go out of their comfort zones. And that's what he's urging both to do explicitly.
Yeah. I thought that the author implicitly made suggestions for us as citizens to be aware of what goes on at UN meetings. The author didn't just say, and everybody needs to be informed of this. She kind of had a roundabout way of pretty much saying that's what we needed to have happen, or these are the consequences that will happen from it, by telling the story of him. And then another one, just to be informed and to stand up for what we believe, to research documents that have been used in our own courts that we haven't ratified, to get the people of our country aware. She did this implicitly by giving the example of him stating what documents have been used. And then she mentioned the proclamation quite a few times that responsible citizens and government need to stand up for families and fight for the traditional family. and that was pretty explicit. And then
Mm-hmm.
she said that through Professor Wilkins' story, she implicitly told her readers that we can also be fighters and fight for what we believe by being more aware of what's going on, as well as being more in tune with the spirit like he was. So.
Yeah, I think that's the big one. Just being, I mean, if you are informed and you have the spirit and you're willing to do whatever God asks you, then you'll be ready when an opportunity comes.
Yep, I agree. Is there any other comments from any of these questions or regarding the book?
I don't think so.
All right, I can summarize then. So we talked about how our original understanding of the UN was either not very much or didn't understand quite what the UN could do with the international documents, even if they weren't ratified with our own country. We talked about how the Lord was always there with Professor Wilkins in making sure that he was able to speak by putting people in his path in order to make him more aware of what was going on, as well as making it possible for him to speak by the end. We talked about that one of the big supporters of the book besides him was his wife, and how she was constantly there for him and continued to support and encourage him, along with the UFI group members there in his beliefs, along with the Catholic and Muslim groups who were also supporting him in his beliefs because they believed the same way. Some of the consequences that we talked about were violence, as well as family and religion not being protected when those are our basic rights. And then something that we can do about it that the author has implicitly or explicitly states was that we can make changes by going out of our comfort zones, and that we can be more aware of what's going on in the UN meetings, and then also what's going on in our world today to be informed to stand up for what we believe. Is there anything I missed?
No. Sounds great.
All right, sounds good. Well, we'll see you guys